I mean, what can I say about the federal election? In some ways, it's been bizarre. Kicked off by the Liberals disavowing the carbon tax. That was their top policy priority for 7 years, during which they viciously attacked anybody who was an opponent of the carbon tax and told everyone they were better off financially with it. And then, wow, a turnaround. That was their best Gilda Radner, for those who remember Saturday Night Live. Emily Littell is going, never mind. And they canceled the tax. Incredibly, they pat themselves on the back for canceling it. Then they follow up by canceling their featured policy of last April's budget, the increase in capital gains. Again, after spending nearly a year extolling its virtues, of course, not acknowledging the damage it would do to the economy by discouraging capital investment, but after a year of that, they cancel it? I mean, what are we supposed to make of that? Does it make every promise in this election campaign suspect? As I said, bizarre. But what's not surprising is that when it comes to the economics and finance of the country, Mark Carney has avoided talking about the Liberal Party's near 10-year record. It's brutal, and he knows it. Of course, he and the Liberal candidates don't want to talk about it, about the decline in competitiveness or the increase in homelessness or the number of Canadians, a quarter, who feel they're living in poverty, or the warning by the Bank of Canada that the decline in the GDP per capita is, in the bank's words, an emergency. Now, while he was embarrassingly wrong on predicting inflation, I'm sure in hindsight, Prime Minister Carney realizes, or should realize, a 28% increase in the money supply in 2 years, along with record government spending, with the vast majority going to the middle class or well-to-do, at a time of supply shortages, would push prices higher and create a cost of living crisis, especially for lower income Canadians. And it's not a surprise that Prime Minister Carney and the Liberals don't want to talk about the 12% increase in homelessness, or the 2 million Canadians who visit food banks monthly, or, as I say, those experiencing poverty. What I find, though, is those stats and the fact that they are ignored is alarming. Now, it's also an example of what is on full display during elections. The issues people care about and who they vote for reflects their values. So let me be clear, I'm not suggesting for a moment that my caring for the vulnerable is more important than any other issue or value that you have. No, it's personally, though, I do think that no one benefits from a weak economy. Individuals as well as our social programs are more vulnerable with a weak economy. But some Canadians have different priorities other than economic growth and sound finances. They're not bothered by the record debt, the explosion in food bank use, that kind of thing. And that polls find that the majority of young people will never feel that they never will be able to buy a home. But it also forms what I think is the basis of the biggest divide in this election. There are those that prioritize economic/financial issues and those that have legitimate other priorities. It could be climate change, 2S LGBTQ1 plus issues, the expansion of government programs like dental and childcare. I have no problem with different opinions, but you know what? I have a huge issue with pretending that policy choices don't have consequences. Abraham Lincoln said, "Give the people the fact and democracy will be safe." Well, the problem is that too often politicians and partisans hide or ignore the facts in order to more easily manipulate voters. I mean, the point to understand about policy is there's no right or wrong, but there are always consequences to each one, including, for 9 years, economics and finance were way down the list of priorities by the Liberals. So it's hardly a surprise, by the way, that me personally, I focus on results like the decline in the standard of living, especially again for lower income Canadians, or the amount of debt and interest charges being passed on to our children. Now, I'm not going to swamp you with a whole bunch of numbers, but I do want to give you just one. By the government's own forecast, the cumulative interest on the federal debt between now and fiscal 2029-30 is $370 billion. $370 billion. And that's what we're passing on to the younger generation. And by the way, I'm well aware, but I don't have a lot of company in that concern. At least I haven't seen or heard a single member of the commentariat mention it. I have friends with children, and it doesn't seem to register. But the good news for those confused or numb by the nonstop political bombardment is it looks like we've retreated right back to the familiar political divisions of the last 5 to 10 years. albeit with a possible exception. I think it's more prominent today, at least, of the divide between younger Canadians versus baby boomers. As the National Post Tristan Hopper points out, have never experienced the consequences of the policies they support. Other than that, we're back to that familiar debate about the size and scope of government. Liberals want bigger government. We've had a 43% increase in the federal workforce since 2015. And that comes with higher taxes, more government spending, more programs, more restrictions on individuals. And one that concerns me is censorship. Obviously, Conservatives disagree. They want smaller government, lower taxes, lower levels of government spending, and a stop to the encroachment on individual freedoms, including they prefer free speech. The good news, though, here's the thing, is that we get to choose which path to take. That's a democracy. Canadians, I hope, take that right very seriously and take a little time to examine the issues and not just settle for something like, well, I just don't like that. Canada's future, make that our children's future, merits far more than that.